You felt it. That moment when you're sitting in church, singing a worship song you've sung 100 times, and you realize nothing. No goosebumps. No tears. No sense that God is anywhere near you. You're saying the words. You're doing the motions. But inside, you feel like a machine running on low battery. And the worst part, the part that keeps you up at night, is that you don't know when it happened. You didn't walk away from God. You didn't make some big dramatic choice to stop caring. You just drifted. And now you're wondering if maybe this is just what faith feels like after a while. If maybe the early fire you had was just emotion, and this hollow going through the motions, is what mature Christianity actually looks like. Here's what I need you to hear before we go any further. Jesus addressed this, specifically, personally. And the answer he gave is buried in an archaeological detail that most Bible teachers completely skip over. And once you see it, you will never read this passage the same way again. We're going in today, deep. Stay with me. Okay, if you grew up in church, you've heard this verse weaponized. Revelation 3 verse 16, the lukewarm verse. Because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. And the sermon you heard probably went something like this. Don't be lukewarm. Be on fire for God. Stop being half-hearted. Stop having one foot in the world and one foot in the church. And you left feeling guilty, and maybe a little motivated for about 3 days. And then, nothing changed. Here's why. Because that interpretation, while it sounds right, misses something enormous. Something that completely changes what Jesus is actually saying to this church. And to understand it, we have to go somewhere. We have to go to a city that doesn't exist anymore. Laodicea. In the 1st century, this was one of the wealthiest cities in the Roman Empire. And I don't mean wealthy like nice houses and good roads. I mean this city was so wealthy that in 60 AD, when a massive earthquake leveled it to the ground, the Roman emperor offered disaster relief funds. And Laodicea said, "No thanks. We got it." They rebuilt the entire city with their own money. No federal aid, no outside help. This was a city that had never needed anyone. They had a world-famous medical school. They produced a specialized salve that was exported across the empire. They manufactured a rare, glossy black wool that was sought after by the wealthy in Rome. Banking, medicine, fashion. Laodicea was the New York City of the ancient world. Now, before I tell you the thing that's going to crack this whole passage open, I need to tell you about Laodicea's one problem. And you need to drop a comment right now with your answer. Wealth? Pride? Idol worship? Guess before I tell you. I'm serious. Pause and comment. I want to know what you think. Because the answer is water. Laodicea had a water problem. 6 miles to the north sat a city called Hierapolis. Hierapolis was built on top of natural hot springs. And I need you to picture this. Steaming, mineral-rich, therapeutic water cascading over white calcium cliffs, pouring out of the earth at a constant 95 degrees Fahrenheit. People traveled from across the empire to bathe in these waters. They were healing. They were powerful. They were used for medicine, for cooking, for warmth. The hot springs of Hierapolis were a resource. They had a purpose. Now, 6 miles in the other direction, east, toward the mountains, sat Colossae. Colossie's water came from mountain snowmelt. Cold, pure, refreshing, crystal clear. You could drink it. You could trust it. You knew exactly what it was. And then, there was Laodicea, right in the middle. And here is the thing that archaeologists discovered that should be in every sermon ever preached on this passage. Laodicea had to pipe their water in. They had no natural water source. So they built an aqueduct, a long, stone pipe system stretching miles, carrying water from the hot springs of Hierapolis all the way to the city. By the time that water arrived, it was lukewarm, thick with calcium deposits, full of minerals that had solidified in the pipes. And here's what you need to know about lukewarm mineral water from a Roman aqueduct. It made people nauseous. It was the kind of water that, when you drank it, your body immediately tried to reject it. Your stomach would revolt. You would, and I want you to catch the word Jesus uses in Revelation 3. You would spit it out. The Greek word there is emisai, vomit. I will vomit you out of my mouth. This is not a polite word. This is a visceral, physical, involuntary rejection. And the people sitting in the church at Laodicea, when this letter was read to them out loud, they would have laughed, or maybe cringed, because they knew exactly what Jesus was talking about. Every single day they dealt with their disgusting aqueduct water. They knew what it felt like to take a sip and immediately want to spit it across the room. And Jesus looks at this church, wealthy, self-sufficient, theologically stable, and he says, "That's what you taste like to me. Now stop." This is where it gets wild. Because here's what the standard interpretation of this verse gets completely backwards. Most people, most preachers, read this verse and they say, hot is good, cold is bad, lukewarm is the worst. So the teaching goes, be hot for God, be passionate, be on fire. And cold means worldly, backslidden, far from God. And lukewarm means you're kind of in between, half committed, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. That's the sermon. That's what we've all heard. But here's the problem with that interpretation. Jesus never says cold is bad. Read it again. I wish you were either hot or cold. Hot or cold. He wants them to be either one. Why would Jesus want someone to be spiritually cold? Why would he wish that for a church? Unless cold doesn't mean what we've been told it means. Go back to the 3 cities. Hierapolis, hot. Healing, therapeutic, purposeful. Colossae, cold, refreshing, pure, drinkable. Laodicea, lukewarm, nauseating, useless, rejected. Both hot and cold had a purpose. Both were useful. Both were a resource to the people around them. Lukewarm water, specifically Laodicea's water, was useful to nobody. So Jesus isn't making a temperature metaphor about your emotional passion for God. He's making a usefulness metaphor. He's not asking, are you excited about your faith? He's asking, are you doing anything with it? And this is where I need to get personal with you, because I think a lot of us have misdiagnosed ourselves. We think we're lukewarm because we don't feel the emotional high of early faith anymore, because we're not crying in worship, because we don't have goosebumps during prayer, and we feel guilty about it, like we're failing. But here's what I want to challenge you on. Feelings are not the thermometer. Usefulness is. So let me give you 3 signs, 3 real, honest signs that your faith has actually gone lukewarm. Not emotionally cool, but functionally lukewarm, useless to the people around you. And I want you to sit with each one of these. Sign number 1, you've stopped being a resource to anyone. The hot springs at Hierapolis healed people. They served people who came from far away. The cold water of Colossae refreshed travelers, fed families, supported agriculture. When is the last time your faith did something for someone else? Not a big dramatic something, not a mission trip or a massive sacrifice. I mean the small everyday things. When is the last time you noticed someone hurting and you actually stopped? When is the last time your faith shaped how you treated someone who couldn't do anything for you? The Laodicean church was self-sufficient. That's actually what Jesus calls out. He says, you say you're rich and don't need anything. They had everything they needed. And because they had everything they needed, they had stopped being a resource to anyone outside themselves. Their faith had become entirely about them. Their blessing, their comfort, their salvation, inward-facing, never outward. And here's the devastating part. They didn't even know it. Jesus says, you do not realize. That's in the text. They were blind to their own condition, which means the people most likely watching this video right now, the people who need this most, are the ones thinking, yeah, this is for someone else. Not me. I'm fine. Just sit with that for a second. Sign number 2. You've confused comfort with spiritual maturity. Laodicea was wealthy, and wealth had done something subtle and dangerous to this church. It had made them comfortable. And comfort is not the same thing as peace. Peace is what Jesus gives you in the middle of the storm. Comfort is when there's no storm to worry about. These people had resources, security, reputation, influence. They had the ancient equivalent of a nice house, a good job, a respected name in the community. And somewhere along the way, the faith that was supposed to push them outward, into discomfort, into sacrifice, into risk, had become just another feature of their comfortable life. Church on Sunday, small group on Wednesday, nice Christian friends, respectable giving, lukewarm, not hot, not healing, not cold, not refreshing, just there. Here's the question I want you to sit with this week. When is the last time your faith cost you something? Not money, maybe money, but I mean, when is the last time following Jesus made something in your life harder? Because if the answer is, I can't remember, that's a sign. Sign number 3, your faith is all private and no public. Now this one is going to push back against something you might have heard. There's a type of Christianity that says, faith is between you and God. It's personal. It's private. Keep it out of your relationships, your work, your conversations. And there's some truth there. Jesus absolutely warns against performative faith, praying loudly on street corners just to be seen. But there's a difference between performance and presence. The church at Laodicea wasn't visible. And here's the archaeological detail that should stop us cold. When scholars study Laodicea versus the other cities in Revelation, the faithful ones, the ones being praised, the difference isn't theology, it's impact. The church at Smyrna, persecuted, visible, known. The church at Philadelphia, holding open a door that nobody could shut, active, moving. Laodicea, wealthy, comfortable, and apparently invisible. Their city didn't know them, didn't need them, didn't feel them. When the people in your neighborhood, your office, your school think about who they'd call in a crisis, do they think of you? Not because you're religious, but because you're safe, you're present, you're useful to them? Okay, I need you to see something in this passage that I think is the most important part. Because here's where most sermons on Laodicea stop. They diagnose the problem, they leave you feeling bad, and they send you home with a to-do list. But look at what Jesus does after he delivers this devastating assessment. He says, and I'm going to read this slowly because every word matters. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in fire, so you can become rich, and white clothes to wear, so you can cover your shameful nakedness, and salve to put on your eyes, so you can see. Did you catch that? He's using their own city against them, in the most merciful way possible. They made black wool, luxury clothing. Jesus says, I have white clothes for you. They produced eye salve, the thing their medical school exported around the world. Jesus says, I have something that will help you actually see. They were famous for their wealth. Jesus says, I have real gold. Everything Laodicea was proud of, Jesus says, I have the real version of all of it. And you can have it, right now. But then, he says the most remarkable thing. Those whom I love I rebuke and discipline. So be earnest and repent. Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. He's not done with them. He's not dismissing them. He's knocking. This letter, the harshest letter of the 7 churches, is also the one where Jesus explicitly says, I love you. Those words, those whom I love, appear in this letter and only this letter. The church he rebukes most strongly is the church he explicitly says he loves. And he's standing outside the door, knocking, waiting, not barging in, not forcing his way in, knocking, which means the door opens from the inside. So what do? I'm not going to give you a 30-day challenge. I'm not going to give you a Bible reading plan, though those are fine. I'm going to give you 3 honest, practical things. And I want you to pick one, just one, this week. First, find one person to be hot springs to. The hot springs at Hierapolis healed people. You don't have to change the world this week. Find one person, one specific person, who is hurting, and do something useful for them. Not something that makes you feel spiritual, something that actually helps them. Cook a meal, watch their kids, sit with them and don't say anything. Be a resource. The moment faith moves outward, even in one small direction, something shifts. Second, let faith cost you one thing. This week, let following Jesus make one thing in your life harder. Maybe that means having a conversation you've been avoiding. Maybe it means giving something away that you've been hoarding. Maybe it means showing up somewhere you don't want to show up. One thing, small, real, costly. That's how you break the comfort cycle. Third, open the door. Remember, Jesus is knocking. The door opens from the inside. What does that mean practically? It means making space, not adding more to your schedule. Making space. Turn something off. Put something down. Sit somewhere quiet. And just wait. This sounds too simple. I know. But Laodicea's problem wasn't that they didn't know enough about God. They were a church. They had theology. They had community. They had the letter from Paul to the Colossians sitting right there. Colossae was 6 miles away. That letter would have circulated. Their problem was they had filled every available space with their own self-sufficiency. There was no room. Jesus was outside the door because there was no room inside. So make room. I want to come back to where we started. That feeling, that hollow, going through the motions feeling. I don't think that feeling is evidence that your faith is dead. I think it's evidence that your faith has turned inward. When water sits still, when it's not flowing anywhere, not healing anything, not refreshing anyone, it goes stagnant. It gets warm. It loses its purpose. But moving water stays alive. The church at Laodicea received the harshest letter, and also the most personal invitation. Here I am. I'm standing here. I'm knocking. Present tense. Right now. Not, I was there and you missed it. Not, I'll come back when you get your act together. Here I am. And if you're watching this and you've been sitting in that lukewarm place for longer than you want to admit, I want you to hear something. The fact that you're watching this, the fact that you feel the lukewarmness, that discomfort, that dissatisfaction, that's not a sign that God has left. That's the knock. He's not asking for a perfect faith before you open the door. He's asking you to open it. Here's what I want to leave you with. This week, not someday, this week, I want you to do two things. One, go back to those 3 signs we talked about. Being a resource, breaking comfort, being visible. Pick the one that hit you hardest and write it down, not in your phone, on actual paper. Write down what you're going to do about it this week. One specific thing. 2, sit with Revelation 3 verse 20, not as a salvation verse, though it is, but as a right now verse. Jesus is not speaking to people outside the church in this verse. He's speaking to people inside the church who have left him outside. Read it as if he wrote it to you today and see what happens. One last thing. If this video reached you, if something in here landed, I want to keep having this kind of conversation with you. We go deep here into the Old Testament, the New Testament, the historical context, the archaeology, the stuff your Sunday school class never had time for. If that's the kind of teaching you've been looking for, subscribing just makes sure you don't miss the next one. That's all it is. No pressure. But if this mattered to you, share it with one person. Not for the algorithm, because someone in your life is probably sitting in the same lukewarm place you were sitting in before you started watching this. And maybe this is the knock they needed to hear. Let me pray for you before you go. God, for everyone watching this, for the person who's been going through the motions, who's been sitting in the pew or on their couch feeling empty and wondering if this is all there is, would you knock louder? Or maybe, would they hear the knock that's already happening? You haven't given up on Laodicea. You were standing outside the door loving them. I believe you're doing the same thing right now. Amen.